So right now, I'm just going to visit Urban Dinosaur, and we're going to talk about some different aspects on it. And one of the points right off the bat that's pretty fresh in my mind is let's talk a little bit about really deciding that feeding like animals that you're finding outside in your yard to your pet. And the reason why I find this really troubling is, I've been doing this for, a long time. And I'm dealing with, a lot of imported animals. Originally, if we go back into the 90s, we're dealing largely, the majority of the animals we even have availability are all wild-caught animals. And these wild-caught animals have parasites. So as a keeper and a collector and an avid hobbyist, my objective is to get my animals that I want to, keep as pets or ultimately create some breeder stock. I want to get rid of the parasites. So we struggle to get rid of the parasites from these animals. So if I was going to get a water monitor, a Nile monitor, a leaf-tailed gecko, anything, we have a lot of work to do, and the work we're doing is getting rid of parasites. So the process of ridding an animal of parasites is essentially poisoning the animal enough to pretty much poison the parasite but not poison the animal. And that's a process right there. And one thing people need to understand is when you are doing this, depending on the parasite load and the sophistication of these parasites as far as the involvement of internal organs and whatever, you're dosing the animal to kill these parasites. And animals that are, let's say, in poor condition or have a significant parasite load, you can kill these parasites, but as you're killing them, you're driving the parasites crazy. So you're attacking the nervous system of the parasite, or you're basically shedding its protective waxy coating, or whatever it is, the mechanics and the physics of killing the parasite. Well, when you're doing that, you're now putting your animal into jeopardy. You really do need to get rid of the parasites, or at least reduce it greatly. So if we have parasites that are living in the lungs of the animals, that are microfilaria, that are going through the blood system of the animal, and all that kind of stuff, we're dosing the animal systemically, and now we have to kill those parasites. Well, if the parasite's living in the lungs, and let's say I go and treat the animal, and the adult worm is just sitting there in the lung, and it's being affected by, whatever the worm is. It could be, ivermectin. It could be whatever. In some of those places, the parasite's safe. In other places, the parasite's being affected because once it becomes treated, throughout the animal, not just the GI tract, the parasite often goes crazy. And it doesn't like what's happening to it, and it's attacking the nervous system of the parasites, so it's causing it to behave differently. These animals have the ability to bore into or through, walls, linings of tissue, into blood vessels and everything like that. And when you're doing that, you're now in jeopardy of maybe that parasite gets into a blood vessel or gets out of a blood vessel or whatever, and you get hemorrhaging. We're still essentially looking at the animal. The animal looks intact. We're like, okay, we just treat it with some of this white liquid and a couple pills or whatever. It can't be that bad because, sadly, we're equating that, and, even myself, too. I can't understand what's going on inside that animal, literally. But we're treating it with something that doesn't look so bad, and then we're waiting to see what happens. And ultimately, we're just hoping that we don't see anything happen, and the animal is basically just going to get better, or it's not going to display any type of ailment. Well, there's a war going on inside that animal, and we don't have any way to understand that. So we have to just, in good faith, go through our dosing and how we do this and hope for the best. And often, things work out okay. But the end result is this. The end result is we're going to get an animal with a far lower parasite load, or we're going to get, close to a complete eradication eventually of these parasites. And captive animals with parasites is not a good thing. We'll have problems, health problems, feeding problems. And another thing, any other cage mate that we ever offer to, combine animals, we're now subjecting those animals to the parasite loads of this animal. Remember, there's a very involved process. We have life cycles of different parasites, which are very sophisticated. And sometimes, your animal can shed parasites, and those parasites are ova or encysted material needs to be ingested by another animal to complete the life cycle. So if I take an animal, let's say I take, a tegu or a monitor, and I go and get the grand idea that I'm going to take this tadpole, I'm going to feed it to my tegu because that seems to be something that I think is very natural or whatever. And in a very simplistic way, I would think, well, my tegu wants to eat that tadpole, and it's exciting for my tegu, and therefore, it's great. I didn't pay anything for that tadpole or whatever. Well, that tadpole or frog or whatever, fish, also carries a bunch of different parasites. But I am picking on tadpoles right now because tadpoles are classic for flukes, such as liver flukes. So if I take this tadpole that looks healthy in itself and I feed it to my tegu, my monitor, I've now allowed that fluke to complete its life cycle. So now that tadpole's ingested by my tegu, and it is now taking into these flukes, these liver flukes, or just general nasty flukes are ingested. They go into the GI tract of that animal, and guess what they do? They go right through the GI tract, which is your gastrointestinal tract of your varanid or your tegu, and then it goes into your body cavity. And these flukes now go and find things like the liver or other parts of the body, and they set up shop, so to speak. Well, what happens if we take a tegu, and let's say I'm living in Michigan, and I take a tadpole from Michigan and I feed it to my Argentine tegu, or my Peruvian tegu, or my Colombian tegu, or Guyana tegu. I've now just introduced a bullfrog or green frog tadpole, and I've taken those parasites and I've introduced them to my South American tegu. Well, my South American tegu likely has never, in the history of tegus, they've never had to deal with that very specific liver fluke or fluke. I keep saying liver fluke, but just fluke, cestode, whatever we want to talk about, from Michigan. So we're taking a native type parasite and introducing it to, let's say, a tropical animal. And sometimes these parasites are very, very specific, and I don't know. I'm not certainly no expert on parasites, but I certainly have a good working understanding, and I'm very aware of what they're capable of doing. So it's really a poor idea to take an animal that, let's say we took an animal that comes from one continent, and then we give it a parasite from another continent. That, to me, is really dumb. You're asking for trouble, and you're really asking to do bad things with the life stages of that parasite. And once you get some of these parasites, they're not always the easiest thing to get rid of. And if you put it into a host that normally would not ingest that particular parasite, you can be really asking for trouble. So why would you take a captive-born animal that you could literally offer it really good food items, whether it's commercial diets, like let's say like a Rapashi diet, or it's frozen diet. Let's say something we would get from Perfect Prey. So I buy my rodents from Perfect Prey, knowing that they provide a very good feed, a lab-style feed, so they can provide rodents that are nutritionally about as complete as you get. I mean, calcium, everything. It's very, very balanced, because the better they feed their animals, the better success they're going to have in producing their product, essentially. So, and they don't have parasites. So I have all these different options to feed my captive animal quality food, but instead I decided, because those tadpoles really looked like something that might be natural or whatever, and I just feel that decision is really, is poor. So why take an animal that we keep in captivity, that we're trying to rid of parasites, and why would we want to thoughtlessly involve parasites that are not normally associated with the origin of that animal? All right, so I guess I'll end with that, but I do have strong ideas on that. Let's see. Let's talk about Joseph Vella. Joseph Vella continues to aggravate me by showing his Bell's lace monitors, his 117 different crocodile monitors, Merokis, and this. They all have ID numbers with like these prison-like ID numbers, because he has so many of them. This guy is clearly a reptile hoarder, and I'm thinking about calling the authorities. No, in all reality, Joseph Vella is a great example of hobbyists such as myself, and I would think most other people on Urban Dino that really are into it. But Joe really puts his money where his mouth is, and he really seems to have just a great collection of awesome animals, and he loves to take pictures of them, and then he just irritates me, and then I have to sit there green with envy looking at his awesome animals, and it's really nice seeing how well his animals are, and it does makes me jealous and whatever, and Joe's a jerk too. So clearly very few people like the man, and I figured I'd just give him a shout out because he sucks. Let's move on to something else. What else can I think of? Well, hopefully people are enjoying things on Urban Dinosaur, and I'm having a cat fight in my room, which is really annoying as I'm trying to do this. Let's see. So let's just go. So mind you, my EMG buzz casts are going to be very, very disorganized, and I think that way I'm more likely to do them without a great deal of thought. So, let's go look at this. Paul Aponte. Paul Aponte got himself a Nerd water monitor, and Paul has, for well over a year, I've watched Paul, look at this and look at that. He's got this animal and that animal. And I don't think he's had great success with some of his animals, and these animals are originating as wild-caught animals. But Paul finally got a Nerd, captive-born and bred, either third or fourth generation water monitor. And I'm watching Paul he's really enjoying posting his success with his new animal. And I love to see that. We have there's a good experience going on here, because I think Paul's really excited about how well his monitor is doing. Unlike, his previous experiences, he now has a very social animal, and he's having success. And that's great. This is what I'm really after, because when we are producing these animals and we're finding people to get these animals, you're really setting yourself up for a long-term relationship with an amazing animal. And obviously I keep lots and lots of reptiles, and I have, a history of being a fanatic. And besides looking at these animals, one of the things that I really enjoy is how I interact with these animals and what I'm learning from them. And I guess like, as we're keeping these animals, we're initially attracted by, just what they look like. So clearly, the crazy colors, the shapes, and all that different stuff is what draws us into it. But at some point, I kind of caught up with, there's maybe more going on than just, essentially just, looking at the animal and interested in the dynamics of what makes that animal interesting. But as I've been working with these animals, and let's say we'll just talk about Varanus salvator. So we're talking about Asian water monitors. And Asian water monitors are very appealing to me in many, many different ways because, yes, they get big, and that in itself is interesting. And I have this, silly little fascination as being a child and drawing dinosaurs. But now I'm playing with these animals that can be managed, in your homes. Obviously, you need to have something that's fitting to your space constraints. So Varanus salvator really gives you a large animal without, something that is beyond reason. Varanus salvator is also proving to be incredibly intelligent. So the more time I invest in understanding these animals, the more I'm learning. And as I've improved my ability and understanding of these animals, I've really kind of unlocked some doors. And I've been really working to teach other people about what I see. And essentially, I guess I'm an animal lover throughout. And I think the more I can get people to see these animals, I can spread, that fascination and hopefully appreciation and love. Because ultimately, my goal is, I love animals. I love nature. I love the environment. And I want people to appreciate things. But the reality is every day there's more people and there's less of the natural world. It's almost like the, human mission statement is to pave the universe. I mean, we're literally destroying the very world that we're living in. So if anything, I can just get people to think about it. I'm looking at, there's a post where they show these Bengal monitors in India. And so, literally a species where we have no working knowledge of these animals. And these animals, and yes, they could say, Kevin, this is just the kind of stuff that happens all over the world. Yes, I understand that. But I have to, just appreciate you've seen this picture of an animal where they take the tail and wrap it around this animal, and then they break the lower mandible, the lower jaw of this animal, so the animal can't bite you, and they stuff the tail in its mouth. And these animals are just literally just wrapped up. I guess it would be the same thing when I see, over in Indonesia where they take different monitors and they wrap their legs behind their back, and then they wrap like a rope from their neck to their tail, and then they can sling it over their shoulder, and then they tie their mouth shut and all that. And, clearly this stuff is horrific, and the idea is that I know what these animals are capable of, but I also understand the reality. I've seen some of the skinning videos of the monitors and how quickly they process and dispatch Varanus salvator is amazing. And ultimately these animals are headed for skins. But it's still, when you see a post, it kind of doubles down on what you're thinking and what you see. But, horrific ideas like that and how people that have no interest or no love or no regard for animals, maybe because they're living, in, a grass and mud hut, and this lizard is no different than the fish that they're catching to eat. Whereas I'm some, snotty ass American that, life is certainly easier than theirs. And I don't have to worry about being eaten by a crocodile or a tiger or something like that. So I guess you have to put it in perspective. But in the same thought, I want to teach people fascination of these animals and involvement in these animals and how literally precious these animals can be to us if put in the right situation. I guess let's talk a little bit about live feeding videos and urban dinosaur and why I do not allow it. Well, I don't allow it because I don't see any purpose. I don't see, and I don't respect the idea that people would engage and actually get some kind of glee, sick, sadistic fascination or whatever. I understand things like this happen, but showing an animal eating something like a live mouse or a rat or whatever, I understand it, but I don't like to see it And then what happens is when it's put into an arena where people see that and then they're like, oh, yeah, it's awesome or whatever, I don't want to sit here and be in the same audience. I don't want to sit here and listen to other people. Yeah, it was so cool when it was screaming. All that does is embarrass me. It basically embarrasses me and other keepers. Let's all be reasonable. I happen to like a lot of life. I like rodents. I like mice. I like rats. I, utilize them in the web of life, but I still have respect for them. And so my employees and everything like that, we all have to have respect for these animals. And I guess it's just something that I do. Yeah. Do I eat meat? Yeah. I'm not a big meat eater. My favorite food or my favorite dinner would be, let's say, salad. And I really enjoy that a lot. But I do think we need to have respect. So I don't see any benefit when we engage in something and we show how wicked we can be and how cruel we can be and sadistic we can be or anything like that. I don't want to be involved with those people. And I also have to deal with, laws and how states view things and everything like that. And I do not see any benefit to us feeding. It makes us look like monsters. And especially if we have some doofus in the background. Oh, that's awesome. It's like, oh my God. It's just, it's heartless. And for a person standing on the outside looking at these animals and wondering why would we want to keep an alligator or a big python or any of this different kind of stuff, and then we back that up with somebody feeding something, a little rodent in a cage and then a snake grabs it and there's just whatever happens, and it's put onto video. That video can come back and haunt us. It's really, I think it's a poor decision. And I really want to just kind of put the best foot forward and, basically, so to speak, embrace the intelligence that we have. There's incredible talent in our industry. And why would I want to embrace the incredible idiocy of people? I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in getting you to think, teaching people about these animals, getting other people to appreciate these animals, and expand our audience. The more people that love animals, the more people that love a coral reef, a rainforest, anything, that's what I'm about. The more people that are, keeping these animals for the wrong reasons or because they want to scare somebody or they want to just do stupid things or they like to watch it do nasty stuff. That's not why I do this. And I have 22-foot snakes. And I have a building filled with predators. But it doesn't mean I have to be a thoughtless, inconsiderate person. So I do want to teach people to respect things like that. And for people that, just want to do these stupid things, those are the people I want to fight with. So what else can I talk about? Like I said, this is not going to be a well thought out podcast at all. I'm just going to sit here and just talk about some random things. And let's see. I'm going through. There's Megan Kelly with her beautiful croc monitor. There's a bin full of little chicks, which I think are rather cute, and people talking about there for 75 cents. Baby chick is not really a great food source as far as if we're going to look nutrition. I do want to thank our sponsor, which would be perfectprey.com, and use the NERD10 coupon code to get 10% off your order. And once again, Perfect Prey, it's frozen rodent supplier, so you're going to get these really neatly packaged rodents. I got a big box the other day from those guys, and it's amazing. I just get this box, and we just start basically defrosting everything, and I get to go run around and feed a bunch of that stuff to my animals, and it's great, But we use a lot of different variety when we're feeding our animals. But one of the basic staples of what we're feeding our monitors and crocodilians and whatever, and obviously snakes, are rodents, and basically you really need to think your source of rodents, where you're getting them from. I've heard, some horror stories, and Jason Raimondi and my friend Mark Busby were chit-chatting about some rodents the other day and possible problems with snakes, sometimes getting rodents from various different sources. I remember my friend Shane Costello and a couple other friends talking about a rodent source and actually getting frozen rodents and then feeding them to the reticulated pythons. And then the reticulated pythons will become paralyzed and die. Well, we are, with certainty, when we see a frozen rat, we are basically expecting and trusting that frozen rodent or whatever we're feeding is safe. That frozen rodent, even though inherently they all look the same to us as far as, looking like, it doesn't look rotted. It looks, clean, it's frozen well, and it's, just, it looks reasonable. So therefore we think, oh, that must be good. So just make sure we consider all of that, when we're getting our rodent sources. And if I have a pet, it could be a pet bearded dragon, it could be a pet basilisk, it could be a pet leopard gecko. These animals in all these different situations can become very special to us, and they're, part of our family, part of our world. And I mean, bearded dragons. Let's look at the amount of people that are keeping bearded dragons and how wonderful bearded dragons are. And they start out their lives eating crickets and waxworms and mealworms and cut up veggies and even some fruit and whatever, and how important they are to us as, a 2-year-old, 3-year-old animal. You come home and there's Spike sitting in the corner of his critter cage, and Spike wants to come out. He wants to sit on us while we're watching TV, and this becomes a family pet. Well, Spike is now literally, it's like the spokesperson of reptiles to other people. So all the people that are entering that person's household, they're seeing that pet bearded dragon. They're like, oh, what's that? Wow, that's cool. And then they're just stunned and how remarkable and how friendly Spike is and how he'll just sit on you and he doesn't bite. And within, short period of time, people are like considering, wow, reptiles, I didn't think they were like that. And the same thing could go to a ball python. The same thing could go to a corn snake. Same thing could go to anything. I mean, think about the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of leopard geckos that are produced that you go into a Petco, you buy, and that cute little gecko and how wonderful they are. But all these different animals are important animals to somebody. And just because I happen to breed, some of the animals I do, doesn't mean I don't really just enjoy the simplicity of the most basic reptile, because I am forever going to be a little kid fascinated by my first whatever. And, there's people getting into the hobby right now as we're talking, and there's people that have been in it, for 20 years. But when we're feeding our animals, do consider your source. And Bill and Jim over at Perfect Prey, their stuff is 100%, it's perfect, literally. So Nerd10 coupon code to get 10% off any of your next orders, and they're really good about shipping out their animals. In fact, I think they have probably a larger audience of customers than they can probably handle, but that's my cheap plug for them. And they're just dumb enough to sponsor me. What else can I think about? Oh, we have Joel Garcia with his outdoor friggin' cage in what looks like a really nice warm place. And we're going to keep looking. Oh, Ty Iper, which I don't know if I can even spell it right. He just had 3 baby shinglebacks born. Boy, shingleback skinks. That's an Australian skink, bobtail skink. Skinks that basically, I guess they can mate for life. So you have a pair of shingleback skinks that find each other, and once they find, each other to be a suitable mate, and I think, females and basically are vying for the best suitor. So just because I'm a female skink doesn't mean I'm going to, allow any male suitor to breed me. So I think a female finds the right male and then develops a relationship with that. That's really pretty awesome. So we're talking about a skink that bonds with its mate like it's a duck or it's a goose or it's many other animals. That's something. And then they keep track of each other. So when they're living in the wild, one of them just doesn't just walk away from the other one. They're staying together. That in itself, if you actually think about that, think how intelligent that animal must be. I'm just thinking about that. And that has a lot of meaning. How we undervalue that kind of intelligence in an animal. And people in Australia, I think you all suck because you get to play with all sorts of cool animals. And when people see somebody from America post, here's a Parenti monitor or here's a lace monitor, and then people are like, I see those, down the street or in my backyard or whatever. Well, you suck because we don't get to do that. And it's funny because all over the world, things that we, find as indigenous animals or we have access to does not mean that, somebody else has availability to that. So I suppose it's all about perspective. Jeff Easter from GIS Herps has a very, very pretty, wow, look at that, of his tegu. It's a blue tegu. Let's see all pictures of your enclosures. Let's see what this is. And there's Joseph Vella again. Various. I could go back to what people want to hear me talk about in podcasts. I was just scrolling through things. And here's my post I posted from YouTube about showing my sulfur monitor, which was originally a baby that Tim Healy made. Tim over in the UK, he sucks too. He's also one of our mods in Urban Dinosaur. Let's talk for a minute about Urban Dinosaur. I think Urban Dinosaur is a pretty good place to talk about reptiles and lizards, and we try to make it edgy, but within reason, and not have too much drama, and also make it so when people, even as unknowledgeable as a newbie may be, can post something and get somebody who knows more than them to respond to them without making them feel like an idiot and a moron. And we want to keep the basically the comments interesting. We don't want to sit here and just be, very mediocre. We want to have, naked talking about Jason. Jason always talks about sending people nudes or something like that. It's fun to have some color. And that's Jason Raimondi we're talking about. And let's see. So I'm not a member of many other groups at all, and I don't know how other groups act, but I know historically when I used to go in other groups, as soon as I got onto that group and I posted anything, it seemed like a lot of times the mods in that group, they're like, this is Kevin, this is nerd, this guy's a know-it-all, and all this different stuff. And then I would go in there and I'd post something, and then I suddenly would become a target. And that was kind of interesting. They didn't like me there because, essentially, if you can educate me and you can, basically, if you can outsmart me and convince me that you know more than I do, then so be it. I make mistakes every day. I'm learning every day. And sometimes I'm a slow learner. But, for me to go on to another group and look at people talking about stuff that I can do in my sleep and then trying to make an example of me, that's a joke. and how these people treat other people. I am certainly not politically correct, and I'm certainly not like, can't we all just get along? Because I'm certainly not that way. I'm just like anybody, and I will draw the line in the sand, and I can be black and white on some things. But to listen to people that think they have some special, unique set of skills, and they've been doing it 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 1 year, whatever, and they're just jabbering on about stuff, and then I'm watching them flame people, and then basically trying to make somebody look stupid. It's a real good thing. You don't have to stick with me and really see what I have to say about you. And I have no problem recognizing the talents of other people, but when I watch somebody that I don't think really has that special set of talents being an actual douche to somebody else, that's kind of hard to watch. Yes, I said douche. I might even say worse things, but I want to be edgy, so I got to use things like that. But it's really tough to watch some of these people on some of these other groups. So I can't even, they don't even let me stay. If they even allow me to be on the group, within short order, I'm getting in arguments with people, and then I can get bounced. So I just created Urban Dino or Dinosaur, so I can at least post something and not get flamed or whatever. And then I get, my mods and my admins, which are people that I like, and I basically think will carry on, reasonable ideas, but still not be, dead boring and whatever. So Urban Dinosaur seems to have grown really well, and hope everybody likes it. And if you don't even know what Urban Dinosaur is and you're listening to this podcast, Urban Dinosaur, just look for Monitor Lizards Urban Dinosaur on Facebook. And it's a group I created a year and something ago. And it's hopefully, basically, it's kind of more designed for people that keep animals, reptiles with legs. But, we're rather loose on that. So that can be, anything from basilis, crocodilians, caiman, varanus, any kind of monitor lizards or anything that, all sorts of different, it could be corytophanes, it could be, tegus, all sorts of different things, but lizard-like minds, I think, stuff like that is what the group is dedicated to largely. So I don't know if I'm even talking about stuff that's interesting to people, but that's the point of these things. If you don't like it, just maybe forward through. Maybe I'll land on something you might like. To people that message me on Facebook and you think I'm some kind of snot and I don't respond to you, let me tell you, this is what's happening. I can't keep up with the messages often. So if you message me and you think that I've somehow, I'm snubbing you, I'm not even seeing your message. I can't possibly manage it. It's funny, like I'll see sometimes looking at a message pane and it's like a message from a year ago. I have multiple computers, so I just leave the computers, I'm logged into Facebook, so I'll leave the screen open or it's in the background, and somebody thinks that I'm like sitting there, and I'm not. I run around, I'm hyperactive. I'll sit down, look at the computer for a few, and run away. I basically don't even look at Facebook on my phone. I just I'm all over the place, so I can't see all these things. So please do not think I'm looking at your message and I'm just snubbing you. So sometimes you might get lucky, and if you do want to talk to me, I'll actually respond to you. But I have lots of animals. I do get super busy. I do get overwhelmed. And I just don't want you to think that I'm just some kind of snot. I am an evil morph god, but that's a totally different story. Someday I'll explain what that is. So Facebook, I think people that spend too much time on staring at your phone and not at your animals think you need to start looking at your animals more. Guy kills a zombie praying mantis, revealing a huge parasite in it. Yeah, that's an eye-opener. I love praying mantises, though. Let's see, we're going to let Cole Chambers in. My admins and moderators are not letting people in. There's 3 requests that's unanswered. Thing we have to be careful about, sometimes we let these people in, and they tend to be spammers. So a lot of times if I see that there's people in the group that have friends, I will instantly let them go in. But usually my admins and my mods will look at them. They'll go click on who they are and see if they're a person that just joined Facebook because they want to post stupid sunglass ads in Urban Dinosaur. What else? We can talk all sorts of nonsense about monitor psychology. Let's see. Let me go look. I don't know how long I've even been talking. I basically just plugged the microphone in and just started yammering away. So, Amanda K. Pike talking about parasites. I did a video a couple weeks ago about a black dragon I got. And essentially, the black dragon looks really good. And it's very easy to just go, oh, that looks great, and just throw it into, my cages, maybe interact with another monitor. Well, sometimes I make mistakes too. And sometimes it's really good to just calm down and not think too quickly and make dumb decisions. So that new black dragon, its weight was good and stuff like that. Just looking at it, it looked good. But I put it in water and I was studying it, and it had a nice, pretty obvious parasite load. And we started seeing a tapeworm hanging out of it. And I did a little video on that. But I did that video as, gross to some people as that is. I just did it as kind of like an eye-opener. And thought that was just, I guess I just get people just to think about their animals and whatever. But the black beast, which is that black dragon's name, that animal is it's gone through multiple wormings so far, and everything seems okay. Appetite's picking up. Bioactive substrate, Marty Stone. So bioactive substrate. So the idea of bioactive substrate is to have the floor media in your animal's enclosure, whatever it could be, a blue tongue, skink, anything, is to have a substantial amount of space where you can actually create bedding that has all sorts of decaying organics, plus originates from something like substrate is cocoa peat, cypress mulch, leaf litter, sand, peat moss, all these different things. And if you combine these things together and you put a deep enough layer, you can basically provide an area where the animal is getting the benefit of the substrate, as far as basically if the animal defecates in there, it kind of, that material, the substrate, is absorbing that and preventing the animal from like walking through its feces and smearing it all over the cage. And just creates, some cleanliness. So if we have enough material in there, so like the, square foot or square inches of the cage is large enough where the animal does something and then still has plenty of space where the rest of the cage is clean, the animal isn't dragging it around. So bioactive, we then start considering we have decaying material in there, and we also have different organisms that are, living in there, like isopods. And, they could be like little, mealy bugs. It could be, a woodlouse colony, isopods, roaches. And I don't mean roaches like lateralis or German roaches, because even those I'm not too keen on. But when I think of roaches, I'm thinking of like, dubias, cave roaches, Guyana spotted roaches, lobster roaches, all those different kind of things. Things that are going to live in the material. So let's say if I have iguanas and I'm feeding them fruits and vegetables, these scraps are then being eaten by other animals that are living in the cage. And those animals are pretty much, they're like janitors of the cage. So you kind of create like a balance. So bioactive soil is literally creating balance in your cage. And the benefits to that are like not having to change your substrate very often, having to manage, when an animal, let's say you keep an animal in this, enclosure where, let's say you had newspaper, the animal then defecates on the newspaper, urea, urates, blah, blah, blah. It can mess it up pretty quick, and aesthetically it doesn't look good. And if we want to practice good hygiene and husbandry, we are trying to provide clean water, clean bedding. We don't want the cage to look dirty and bacteria and stuff like that. So we want to kind of minimalize all that. And good husbandry is essential. If we want to have healthy animals, we want to manage their cage. And bioactive certainly helps. But there's all sorts of different ways to do that. But the trick is to have a good substrate layer. And if I made my substrate, an inch or two, what would happen is it would be very hard to manage bioactive as far as creating a environment that isopods and other insects could live without dying. And if I put it an inch or two, that means, one day it's humid, 2 days later it's not humid, and all that kind of stuff. And those animals can then desiccate and dry out. So if we start making, like, let's say, 4 or 5 inches or even more, sometimes, in larger enclosure, we can make them a foot. When we start doing that, now we're starting to provide a reliable environment. Could be an earwig, could be, isopods, that they're not getting dried out and they can, survive. So we have to consider all these goofy little things like that. But you do need a layer of substrate, and you also want to make sure that it's not soaking wet, and we want to make sure that the lower area, so if I have 8 inches of substrate, naturally, as the animals move around the cage and it's packing things down the cage, the bottom layer of substrate might be like the dead zone, where everything is packed down, there's not a lot of oxygen, so sometimes it might be a good thing to get in there and dig it up, overturn it, and also make sure your material in there sometimes is kind of fluffy, and it's something that's, like if I made it all sand, it's going to be very compacted. But if I add things like peat moss and leaf litter is great. Getting leaves that start breaking down, you put that in there and creates different levels of moisture. Like the surface area would be, not as moist as, let's say, 3 or 4 inches down. So all that different stuff is, is a good idea, but it's a good idea when we're doing lizards and stuff like that. I like that a lot. Bathing monitors and kissing reptiles on the lips and posting it to social media. Well, Nico thinks that that's something to talk about. Well, I guess, yeah. So we're playing kissy face with an alligator, big monitor, blah, 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 blah. So posting that on social media. So we're posting on social media because we want to get attention. And we want to show we can, I think it's one thing where posting on social media, like kissing on the face or whatever we're doing, is all secondary. And, that's just part of us, loving that animal or whatever. I think that's, one thing. But I guess what it's doing is probably making us look kind of like idiots, like they're kissing a big giant lizard. So let's think about what the National Humane Society wants to do. So if you go read their website, they're going to tell you that reptiles all carry salmonella and blah, blah, blah. Well, so doesn't chicken. So when I go down a grocery store aisle, there's way, way greater chance of me getting salmonella by touching a package of chicken than me playing with all my reptiles. Now, mind you, I have dealt with thousands and thousands and thousands of reptiles, and I will certainly often eat while I'm interacting with reptiles. And I've been doing this a long time, and I've never gotten salmonella from any of my animals. But I will tell you, if you are feeding raw chicken to your animals, potentially raw chicken could be tainted with salmonella. So if I take a tainted piece of raw chicken and I feed it to my Savannah monitor or whatever, in theory, I've now just inoculated my potentially non-salmonella-ridden pet with tainted chicken. And now my salmonella has been passed on to my Savannah, and then I go play kissy face with my Savannah. Oh, maybe I just inoculated myself with salmonella. So yeah, I can see the problem there. But in the National Humane Society, as they argue against keeping any pet, and certainly reptiles, because they are out to get us, they're going to try to do anything they can to hyper-excite uneducated people, which happens to be most people. But certainly non-animal people, they will not approve of reptile keepers keeping animals. And then the Humane Society just makes us look like a bunch of crazy mental cases. And then they tell you not to have reptiles in your household if you're below the age of 7 and you're over the age of 70, because that could be a real health issue because reptiles all carry salmonella and blah, blah, blah. That's just another tool the National Humane Society uses to miseducate. And they are literally pretty close to being the devil, as they, their mission statement is to end pet keeping in the United States. So since reptile keepers are largely on the fringe of other pet keepers, obviously people that keep, parakeet or goldfish or whatever, those people are more associated with, pet keeping versus somebody that wants to keep, big lizard or an iguana or a snake or something like that. So we are easy victims, whereas somebody that wants to keep a budgie, a parakeet, a goldfish, those people would be harder to villainize or vilify than the weirdo that wants to keep a big, 10-foot boa constrictor. So they'll just say, oh, it could be a health issue, or you're endangering people because those animals have salmonella. So, it's just a dirty way that they do their things. They put commercials on TV showing a cute little kitten or a puppy that's being abused, sitting in god-awful conditions, and, no one takes it out, no one feeds it, somebody does cruel little things, and all that stuff is very, very sad. But they get people to think, well, if you give us, $1.67 a day, we'll do everything we can to prevent that puppy or kitten or anything from being abused. That's not what they're about. They're about getting millions, if not billions of dollars into their big, fat, nonprofit bank account so they then can hire lobbyists who then befriend and align themselves with U.S. Fish and Wildlife or other legislators or senators or whoever else that they can, do favors for. But all they want to do is to bankroll legislation and ways to end the keeping of these animals. And we have really fast-tracked a lot of this stuff in the past 10 years of the animals that we're keeping. And, the great way to end the keeping of these animals is just to basically legislate them out of our lives. And it's happening so fast. I'm in New Hampshire. So if we look at New Hampshire, and I look at other laws of the states that are all around me, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island. It's like I'm an island of legislation, an island surrounded by legislation. Well, I'm in New Hampshire. So as long as I'm in New Hampshire, I can work with my local Fish and Game, and I can educate them, and I will have an effect on them. And I certainly try to have an effect on other states around me. I'm certainly interested in protecting anybody and their rights, working with USARC, working with the attorneys, educating, the attorneys, which ultimately, therefore, we can educate the judge to battle these laws. But it is massive. I am completely feeling almost at this point, nearly powerless with the amount of laws. And these laws are based on, just nonsense. But we can go into so much of this in later, podcasts. I'm just kind of just randomly just touching on stuff, and I'm just rambling away. Let me take a look. How important is a good basking spot for varanids? So, let's go a little beyond varanids. How about just lizards? Well, depending on the lizard you're working with, they have so different needs. But let's talk about our sun worshippers. So that could be a bearded dragon, Uromastyx lizard, and bearded dragon Uromastyx. These guys are really going to want to get nice and warm. So what is the animal getting out of being really warm? Well, the animal is able to elevate its immune system to basically manage the pathogens. So that means, like, say, parasites, bacteria, fungi, and whatever that's in that animal's environment, that basically allows an animal to maintain a balance with these things in their life, so they normally would encounter in their natural environment. So if I take an animal and I keep it cooler, I keep it, let's say, where it still eats and it still kind of functions, but on a lower scale of where it normally would live, I am them saying, okay, we're going to allow your immune system to only, let's say, work at 50%, 60% capacity. What's going to happen, it might be the first week, it might be the first 6 months of that animal's life, I'm going to say your immune system is constantly compromised. So essentially, let's say I'm going to go, you now have lizard AIDS, which basically means your immune system is not going to work like it should. And when you're under assault from bacteria, fungi, parasites, your immune system just isn't going to be able to manage those like it normally would. We're basically putting the animal to a dangerous position in its life. But if I said, so instead of allowing you to bask at 90 degrees, I'm going to let you bask at 130 degrees. At 130 degrees, that animal is going to run over to its hotspot, get its temperature up, and its core temperature, not talking about surface temperature, but a temperature where that animal is comfortable. It feels good, and it sits there for 20 minutes, and it gets just hot enough. It knows what it really needs to be at. And then it runs away and cools down and goes into its ambient temperature environment. That's called thermoregulation, and that is basically the essence of what reptiles do. Since they're not warm-blooded, reptiles thermoregulate. So they go and find a source of heat where they then bring their body temperatures to that temperature, and then they heat up. And then once they get hot enough, they run away because they need to allow themselves to cool down or at least maintain the temperature. They just sit there underneath the light. They could then get into a life-threatening situation, and they could die. A lot of these animals, even though they can bask at 130 degrees, it doesn't mean they can live at 130 degrees. So you need to think about that. So a bearded dragon can bask at 130 degrees, as a Uromastyx, as a Nile monitor, as a whole bunch of different animals. But that doesn't mean that they're trying to gain a core temperature of that. Their core temperature may only be 95 degrees. And a lot of these animals, their core temperature of 100 degrees at 5 minutes can be lethal. So we provide the warm hot spot where they go over there, they warm up, and then they run away. The trick is to make their hot spot not so hot where they go over there and they just get burned. You're putting your hand on the whatever it is that you're using for them to sit there. But generally you want something like, a brick or stone or something, obviously it's not going to crush them, but that's going to hold all that infrared UVA energy from a basking light ceramic heat emitter, and it's going to provide an area where you put your hand in and you're going to think, yeah, that's warm. Not, oh my gosh, that's kind of hot. Like where if I leave my hand here, it's going to start cooking. You don't want something like that. You want to feel like, yeah, that's nice and warm. What's that temperature? Well, that temperature is probably 125, 135, something like that. And using things like thermometers and temp guns and all that kind of stuff is really going to allow ourselves to become educated. We do that for a while, and we touch it, we associate that temperature with what we're seeing on a temp gun. Before long, we're going to go, I kind of think I get it. And, this is all part of stuff, we're just learning. So remember why a key hotspot is very important. Basically, is going to allow the immune system to work, and it's also going to aid in digestion. These animals evolved in these temperature climates where they need that temperature. So if I'm a uromastix and I'm not being kept warm enough, I can't digest those seeds, those legumes, those dried split peas, or any of that, heavy cellulose-based diet that I'm eating. These animals, a lot of these herbivores, they have a very complicated relationship, a symbiotic relationship with the pathogens and the microbes that live in their gut. Microbes living in the gut, just like a termite. Termite eats cellulose. That cellulose is ingested by a termite, but it also maintains these microbes in the gut, which then digest that cellulose and turn it into things like sugars or whatever. So we're talking, say we take a coral reef. We take corals. Corals have, a lot of them have these algae in their gut. And the algae are photosynthetic, which means that they need the sun's energy to basically create photosynthesis. I can't even say it. And that photosynthesis basically creates sugars that the algae is creating, which essentially will feed these corals. And some of these corals will also eat, different single-celled things and phytoplankton that are floating around in the water that they can capture in their mouths. But they also have these algae that provide, energy for these corals. And when we talk about bleaching of corals, we're essentially talking about, ozone depletion, and too much UVB is being cast down onto the, earth, into the corals as it's too much. It's too much UVB, and it's basically killing these relationships and these algae which are in the gut of the coral. So when we bleach the coral, that algae is dying. Now you have this algae that no longer has this very complicated symbiotic relationship with that algae. And those animals, the coral, which are essentially animals, they've lost that relationship, and those animals will ultimately die. So we have these massive coral bleachings. Well, if you thought about the same kind of thing, and we have a uromastix or whatever, this herbivore, we need to basically keep that animal in a temperature gradient where those microbes can survive and help that animal basically break down, what it's eating. So these animals need to digest, and we have meat eaters. They need those certain temperatures where they're going to basically eat and digest the meat and the fats and the sinew and the tissue. And if we keep a carnivore too cool and they ingest, a prey item or some kind of meat, the food will begin to rot in the gut, and then you can get like pancreatitis, which basically, the animal just goes into this really bad thing where they can't digest their food. They're not releasing enzymes and everything to allow them to utilize what's in the diet, and then the food rots in the stomach. A lot of times these animals will throw up. It'll be this greasy, disgusting mess in the cage and all this different stuff like that. But these animals aren't warm because they just like being hot. They're warm because this is how their body works. And when you rob them of that ability to get warm enough, they don't always, they're not behaving in an optimal way. And so all this stuff is very important. So you need to make sure that the basking temperatures are right, but you also need to maintain, proper ambient temperatures. If you have a nice hot area and then the animal runs away and it sits at 50 degrees because it's either fry or get cold, that's not going to work either. So managing your ambient temperatures, and ambient temperatures means your air temperatures, your temperature where the animal's not basking, it runs to the other side of the cage, and as it starts cooling down, what's it going to cool down to? If we take a monitor and we cool it down to, 72 degrees, so it gets warm and goes up to 130 degrees for a basking temperature and runs away, now it goes down to 70 degrees, and it just sits there and it goes to sleep. Over time, its core temperature is going to go down, and it might be 76 degrees or 72 degrees, and it just ingested a huge meal. Well, that meal potentially can rot. So that's why we use an under-tank heater. So when the animal's sleeping at night, when there's no basking, then it still has some way to get a warm environment that helps it and allows it to basically digest. All right, so I will end right here, and maybe I'll combine. I don't even know how long I even went, but we'll end it here, and maybe I'll need to just paste this into some more chit-chat. And I was thinking about talking to one of my friends, Sylvester Tinkelbaum, at some point. I want to get like the mindset of an average guy that keeps just maybe only 12 animals and see what's important to them. Sometimes I with all the different animals that I'm keeping, sometimes I kind of maybe forget like what the novice keeper, just somebody that keeping 2 leopard geckos, has a bearded dragon, thinking about getting a basilisk, and keep some fish. So that way I'll hopefully stay kind of grounded. So hopefully everyone got something out of this babble. And I just knocked over my microphone. This is really bubblegum type stuff. So we'll see how this goes. And if you guys like it, I would love to hear feedback. I'd love for you to go visit New England Reptile Distributors on YouTube. Certainly our Facebook is New England Reptile on Facebook. I'm the Evil Morph God, also known as Kevin McCurley. But this is EMG Buzz. And also visit Evil Morph God on Instagram and any other kind of horrific social media I can get myself into. But we want to spread the word, and I'd love to hear your feedback. And hopefully you found some kind of value to this nonsense that I'm doing. And as we get going, if I find the need to continue to do this, I'm basically going to base that off of my feedback I get from you guys. If you guys tell me I suck, then maybe I'll go back under my basking rock. But for right now, I'm out and I'm chattering. So I would appreciate some good feedback. And certainly people on Facebook, if you don't know about Urban Dinosaur, monitor lizards, the Urban Dinosaur on Facebook. And we also have, for my Crotalus horridus timber rattlesnake lovers, I have, during the winter, it goes dormant, but look for timber rattlesnakes on Facebook. I have all sorts of goofy little interests. So hopefully everyone enjoyed this. Goodbye.